If you are getting orders but still not making any money, it's probably your pricing. Today, we're gonna price these cookies, track all of the costs, plug in the numbers, and by the end, you will have a repeatable process to price any baked good for profit. Hi, I'm Erica, and welcome back to Atori Cafe. I'm in the process of relaunching my home bakery, and after rebuilding my pricing system from the ground up for the last 2 weeks, it's made pricing so much easier. I'm super excited to show you, so let's jump right in. As we make this recipe, I'll walk you through all of the numbers that we need to gather first. When you're shopping for things like ingredients, supplies, or packaging, you wanna make sure to keep your receipts and note down the quantity that you bought because we're gonna use that later. And then when you're actually making the recipe, I recommend weighing out all of your ingredients in grams and having your recipes in grams as well. That way, all of the ingredient costs are reusable across your recipes. Now, the next thing you wanna do is time your hands-on labor. The goal is to get 2 numbers. The first number is gonna be your variable labor. This is basically the amount of time you spend on work that is per item. So that means things like shaping cookies, filling cupcakes, decorating each item. And then the second number you wanna get is the fixed labor. So this is the total amount of time you spend doing work that is gonna stay about the same even if you scale up a recipe. So that's gonna be things like measuring ingredients and making the dough. And one thing you wanna note here is you wanna skip any time that's not hands-on. So things like chilling dough, proofing dough, and baking time. Now that I finished making the dough, I like to estimate about how much more dough would fit in my stand mixer. So in this case, I think I could fit another 2 batches the same size in the stand mixer bowl. So just make note of that because we're gonna use that later as well. You're also gonna need to track how many supplies you use to actually make the recipe. For example, for this recipe, I'm using 2 gloves. I have a ruler here, so using that, I know I'm using about 8 inches of plastic wrap and then 10 inches of parchment to line this tray that we're gonna chill the cookies on. And then I'll also use a ruler to check how much parchment I'm gonna use to line the baking trays when I actually bake the cookies. Supply cost is a real thing when it comes to baking, so you definitely want to keep track of that to make sure it's not slowly kind of eating into your profits. All right. All of the cookies are now out of the oven. You wanna take note of exactly how many servings your recipe makes. So in this case, my recipe made 6.7 cookies. And then the final thing you need to decide is the packaging for your item. So in this case, I brought out 2 options, but I think I'm gonna go for the 5-inch cookie bag. It perfectly fits that. And then I would go ahead and use this size of label that I've made many times before. We now have all the information we need to price these cookies, so let's go ahead and do that. We did the hard part, so now we can finally sit down, put in the numbers to calculate a recommended selling price, and finally pick a price. I used to struggle so much with pricing. I had formulas scattered across spreadsheets, and I feel like I was never consistently accounting for all the little costs that really add up when you run a business. So I created this Notion template for myself, and that's what we're gonna use to calculate everything in real time. First, we're gonna define the values that are gonna guide the recommended selling price. The first and maybe the most important variable of all is gonna be your hourly wage. Now, this totally depends on your situation. It could be anything from minimum wage if you're limiting orders and you really wanna take this as a hobby, or it could be even more than a baker's wage in your local area if this business is gonna be your main source of income. In my personal experience, running a home bakery is physically taxing, so you wanna set your hourly wage as what you want to be paid when the going gets tough, because there are gonna be days when your back is killing you, you don't feel well, you're running on 1 hour of sleep. And in those moments, you're gonna feel a lot better if you know that you are being properly compensated for your time. So for this pricing example, I'm just gonna put $21 as my hourly wage. Now, the next variable we need to decide is the target prime cost percentage. In my research, I found that prime cost is the standard term in the food and beverage industry for the sum of all of your raw material costs and labor costs. You might have also heard of cost of goods sold, or COGS, and I learned that that actually has a very different definition in the food and beverage industry versus outside of it. So for clarity, we're not going to use that term. We're all about prime cost. So for the target prime cost percentage, I'm going to set that as 60% for now, which I found to be a healthy target in the industry to aim for. Now, the next thing we're going to put in is something that's super easy to forget, and that is the credit card processing fee percentage. I'm going to put 2.9 here because that is the max percentage fee out of all the different payment processors that I use. And finally, we're just going to put in our local sales tax percent, and this is going to be used to calculate the tax on my packaging costs. Next, we're gonna enter in all of our raw material costs, and this is where your receipts are gonna come in. I already have here most of the ingredient costs, but let's go ahead and add in the two that I am missing. One is gonna be the cost of pistachio paste. If you have your receipt handy, you're just gonna go ahead and enter in here the price of the item, the number of units in the size that you purchased, and the specific unit of this item. I'm gonna leave that as grams since it's pistachio paste and I have all the measurements in grams. And then I'm just gonna put Amazon as the vendor here. For the pack price, it's gonna be $16.03. And for the pack size, it was about 21.2 ounces, which is 601 grams. And then for that item, there was no shipping cost or taxes because there's no tax on groceries in New York. And now I'm gonna show you what you can do if you're trying to put in an ingredient that you don't have the receipt for. Let's say I already had the pistachios on hand, so I didn't go out and get that, so I don't have the receipt anymore. In that case, I would basically just search for the price of that item at a retailer that I would actually get it for my business. Amazon is one that I feel like has pretty good prices most of the time. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and go with this Amazon Fresh one. I think it's probably gonna be a pretty good price. So let's go ahead and fill that in. This is gonna be $11.12 for the pack price, and it contains 12 ounces, which is about 340 grams. And then again, I don't have any shipping or taxes paid on this one. And there we go. Now we have all the cost per units for all the ingredients and supplies that we used in this recipe. And the cost per unit is just gonna be the total price that we paid, which includes like the item price, of course, and then also any shipping and taxes divided by the pack size that we put. Also, if you have any recipe level overhead costs, like if you have a gas or electricity meter that you can check how much of that resource you actually used in your baking session, then you can go ahead and just add a line item in that table as well. Now all we have to do is the exact same process for the packaging costs. I already put in everything here, but basically it's just the same deal. We're gonna put the pack price, the pack size. So in this case, that's just gonna be like for this pack, how many products can you actually package? For example, 250 bakery boxes is pretty self-explanatory, but the pack size for ribbon here represents how many 12-inch pieces of ribbon can you cut out of this $13.99 price pack. And then you're just gonna put in your shipping cost, and the tax cost is gonna be automatically calculated with the local tax rate that we put up above. Now we have all of the cost per units for our ingredients, supplies, and packaging, and we're gonna be able to reuse those values for other recipes as well. Now the next thing we need to do is calculate the cost of the recipe. We're gonna do that without the packaging. That way we have some flexibility in reusing this cost to price the item individually or within a set. First, scale your recipe and have it ready in the batch size that you expect to make most often. For this example, I'm just gonna say that the batch size I expect to sell this recipe at most often is 6 cookies. I'm gonna name this recipe pistachio stuffed cookies for now. And let's start by adding in all the ingredients that we used in this recipe. First thing in the recipe is butter, and we used 122 grams of butter, which in total is 88 cents. I used 5.7 grams of kosher salt, which is 1 cent. And now I'm just gonna quickly fill in the rest of the recipe. And don't forget to put in your supply cost as well. So for this recipe, I used 2.9 feet of parchment paper, and in total I used 3.6 feet of plastic wrap. Now that we have all of the ingredients and supplies entered in, it is officially time to enter some last details about the recipe. Like we discussed before, I'm just gonna say this recipe makes 6 cookies. And now we're gonna put in our labor costs that we work very hard to time. First, for variable labor, is gonna be the sum of all the time that we spend doing work that is per item. So for this recipe, that includes the 6 minutes that it took to portion the pistachio paste that went into the center of these cookies. Then it took 10 minutes to shape and fill all of the cookies. And finally, 16 minutes in total to decorate the cookies. That includes the time to pipe on more pistachio paste, put on some more chocolate, sprinkle the chopped pistachios, and finally to use a little cookie cutter to round them out at the end of the bake. So all of that together is 32 minutes of variable labor. Next up is the total fixed labor time. This is the time we spend doing hands-on work that's gonna stay relatively the same even if we scale up or down down the recipe. That includes the 12 minutes to weigh out all of the ingredients and 10 minutes to make the dough. So in total, 22 minutes for fixed labor. All right, and the final piece of the puzzle here, which is gonna make our lives so much easier, is going to be entering in the best case batch servings, which just means the size of the maximum batch you can make in your home kitchen in one go. Because we kind of checked how full the bowl was after we made the dough, we can pretty confidently say that for this recipe, the max batch we could make without having to really repeat a lot of that fixed labor is gonna be a batch of 18 cookies. Now we're effectively gonna make like a packaging recipe. This is gonna make the packaging cost that we calculate here reusable for other recipes. Like if I make any other cookie of a similar size, I can go ahead and use these same packaging costs. I'm just gonna name this 4-inch cookie packaging because the cookies are about 4 inches wide. And then I'm gonna go ahead and link up which of these packaging components belong to that packaging combination. We decided to go with the 5 by 5 inch cellophane bag and an item label. Then I'm probably also gonna need a glove to put all of the cookies into the packaging. Nice. So now we know that for that packaging combo, per cookie, it would be about 8 cents. The last thing we need to add here is the packaging labor cost. This is a part that I always forgot to account for, but it really adds up, especially at markets where you basically have to pre-package everything. Here, I'm just gonna say it probably takes me 2 minutes in total because I do also print and cut my own item labels. So factoring that in, I think it's gonna be about 2 minutes to actually cut out a label, put a cookie in a bag, and seal it up and stick on the label. Okay, there we go. So now the total packaging cost is actually 78 cents per cookie. We are officially at the finish line. All we have to do now is put together the recipe cost and the packaging cost to calculate a recommended selling price for this item, and then we can go ahead and pick our final selling price. If you want to do this the fast and repeatable way, the Notion page I'm using is linked down in the description. Or if you just want to learn about pricing more in depth and get worksheets and formulas to price one item, I'll link my $7 pricing starter kit below as well. Okay, let's see the numbers. I actually have not done this yet, so we're gonna look at these recommended prices together. I'm just gonna call it like a single packaged pistachio stuffed cookie. All we have to do here is link the packaging combo that we made and then the recipe. It automatically pulls in the recipe cost that we made earlier and also the best case recipe cost for the max batch that we estimated earlier. Oh my gosh. And now let's see. In total, if we make these cookies in a normal batch size, the prime cost of a single cookie is gonna be $7.66, which kind of makes sense because I am just loading these up with as much couverture white and dark chocolate as possible, as well as being very, very generous with the pistachio paste and the size. So given that we set the target prime cost percentage to 60%, final recommended selling price for one of these cookies, if we were to make it in this 6 cookie batch, would be $13.15. And that factors in the very real 2.9% card processing fee that we added in as well. But let's say if we got a bulk order for these cookies and they wanted to order like 18 or more cookies, we could very well use the best case efficiency pricing, which is gonna be $11.67 per cookie. Now that we have some guidance on what the recommended selling price should be, given our hourly wage, the target prime cost percentage, credit card fees, and the actual cost of all the ingredients and supplies and packaging that goes into this product, we can finally decide on the actual selling price. So let's say for one of these cookies, I think I'm gonna sell it for $13.99. If we do that, then our actual prime cost percentage is gonna be around 56%, which is pretty promising because that leaves $6.33 as our contribution margin, which is kind of the remaining amount of money that we get from selling one of these items, which is gonna have to go towards all of our monthly overhead, mistakes, admin time, and basically any other cost of running the business. And if you wanna sell the item at a lower price, you totally could. Let's say, for example, I wanna sell it at $11.99 per cookie. In that case, the prime cost percentage is gonna be around 66%, but honestly, that could be okay because it totally depends on your situation. Like maybe I want to sell these cookies for $11.99 for a limited amount of time to get more customers. That's a totally fair reason. And now that we've priced our first product, we can also go back and adjust some settings as well. For example, what if I'm planning to position my bakery as a super luxurious high-end bakery with luxury baked goods as my product? Maybe in that case, I think I could charge $15.99 for these cookies. And because I'm planning to do that, I want to pay myself more. So instead of an hourly wage of $21, I want to pay myself like, I don't know, $25. Then we can come back and see if my selling price is $15.99, I could totally pay myself $25 per hour. But the key here is that because we're actually tracking all of the costs to make and sell this product, we're able to actually make informed decisions when it comes to pricing. With pricing, it might seem like it's intimidating at first because you do have to actually gather some information, but once you put in the work, a lot of that is actually reusable. Like for example, if I want to make another version of these stuffed cookies with like Nutella, I can reuse a lot of the hands-on timing for shaping and filling the cookie dough. And in terms of supplies, I know how much parchment I need now to line one of these pans, so I can just go ahead and reuse that as well. And if I want to price a set which includes this cookie and another item, I can go ahead and reuse the price of this recipe to quickly calculate what I should price that at. The truth is, if you want to set your business up for financial success, pricing your product sustainably is the #1 most impactful thing you can do. Hundreds of hours and thousands of baked goods later, you'll be glad to know the numbers, to know for a fact that all of the time, energy, and money you've invested is all worth it. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful and what you want to see next. Stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.